motherfuckers? The haters back. It's Monday night. Let's talk about Raw. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's not much to talk about because this Raw was just very boring. I didn't enjoy it at all, if I'm being honest. Not that I enjoy Raw typically. I really don't. But it did have some high points. I'm going to tell the truth. You know what I'm saying? So, without further ado, let's just get to the show, you know? The show starts out and we're introduced to Samoa Joe on commentary. I mean, just when you think this guy is gone, he's back in commentary, you know what I mean? That's like his entire career now. He's just like, get injured, go back to commentary, come back to wrestling, pretend you're like this tough guy, get injured again, you know? Aside from Sami Zayn, who is now the Intercontinental Champion, so I guess it's a little bit different. But aside from Sami Zayn, I would say that Samoa Joe is the biggest failure in the history of WWE. I mean, like, he's got to be right up there. I mean, I'm not saying he's like the worst wrestler or that like there's been no bigger jobbers, because there obviously have been. But it's more an issue of like what they expected of him and what the fans expected of him and what he's been able to achieve. I mean, he's done basically nothing, you know. It's just a complete waste of time. So we see him, which I did not like, and he had this like arrogance, like, oh, I'm back, you know, like nobody cares, dude. You're not cool. You're not good enough. You never were. I mean, except for TNA. And since then, no one ever liked you, kid. So piss off. That's what I gotta say about that. The first 40 minutes of the show are dedicated to MVP introducing three people: Rey Mysterio, Apollo Crews, and Aleister Black, I believe. Zelina Vega comes in and interrupts with her like three-man trio. She says they're the future, and that Aleister, Rey Mysterio, and Apollo were at one point the future as well. But here's the thing, and she said like they didn't measure up. I'm just thinking to myself, what are you talking about? Rey Mysterio is like one of the most legendary wrestlers of all time. Like, all three of the people in Zelina Vega's stable combined are not going to have one Rey Mysterio career. You know what I mean? Like their entire careers combined will not even amount to like 1/8 of a Rey Mysterio career. So that's just like fake news, you know? I mean, Rey Mysterio is objectively one of the best wrestlers ever. So she was making it seem as if like, you know, these people never lived up to their potential, which you could say about Apollo Crews, and you could argue about Aleister Black, but you could definitely not make that argument for Rey Mysterio, especially comparing him to people like Austin Theory, who really has absolutely no chance of ever becoming anything unless he really changes it up, motherfuckers. So there you go. This led to a 6-man match. The match was all right. I didn't really watch all of it. I was on my phone a little bit. It was pretty boring, but like it had some good moments. I mean, and the best moment was Apollo Crews got the pin. You know what I mean? He got the pin. That's what was like the story of this match, and that was good. You know, it made me happy to see Apollo Crews get the pin because I've been like a low-key Apollo Crews fan, and it validates my point that WWE is finally starting to realize what I've been saying for a long time, and that is that people like Cedric Alexander, fucking Ricochet, Apollo Crews, Buddy Murphy, fucking who else? A number of other people. You understand what I'm saying? Tozawa, Mustafa Ali. A bunch of these guys are interchangeable jobbers. You know what I mean? Aleister Black as well. Like, they're just interchangeable, you know? So why give the opportunity to Ricochet where you have Apollo Crews, who at least is a beast? You know what I'm saying? He can do everything that Ricochet can do probably, and he can do power moves. And he's not weird, you know? So it made me happy that Apollo Crews got his opportunity because he has been denied it for so long, while people like fucking Humberto Carrillo and fucking Finn Balor keep getting opportunities, and Apollo Crews, who's done nothing wrong really, I mean, he's not a small guy, he's done everything he's supposed to do to be like a star, right? But he's like, they haven't given him a chance. Now, I know you're thinking, oh, he has no charisma. Who the fuck knows if he has charisma? They've never let him speak on the mic, you know? They've never let him develop his character. At least people like Humberto Carrillo and fucking, Finn Balor have had, like, Finn Balor has had so many opportunities to do something, you know what I mean? And that's one thing that people don't realize. Like, if you're given an opportunity, you can make the most out of it. And I will give a good example of that very soon in this video as it comes up, motherfucks. Next up, we have some sort of triple threat match that ended in like a DQ or something. I don't know what the fuck happened, to be honest. I must have skipped around during the commercials and I missed the end. But it just ended with Nia Jax. It was Nia Jax versus Asuka versus Shayna Baszler. It ended with Nia Jax beating the shit out of both of them and threatening to throw a ladder on him, right? And she doesn't. So I'm thinking to myself, if it's a triple threat, there's no DQs. So why did it end? But I didn't really care enough to rewind, let's be honest, right? The only thing that was noteworthy here was Nia Jax came out looking fat as fuck. You know what I'm saying? She is a fat broad. Now, here's the problem with that. It's an aesthetic business. You know what I'm saying? It's an aesthetic business, and you have to fit the mold. You know? You have to be aesthetically pleasing, motherfuckers. You know, unless your gimmick is that you're not aesthetically pleasing. Like, if you're Snitsky, you don't have to look like Dolph Ziggler. You can just be Snitsky, right? But beyond that, you have to try to look good. Now, this brings me to my other point that I realized while watching this match. If wrestling were real, like if kayfabe were to be believed, right? When Nia Jax won the world title at WrestleMania against Alexa Bliss, one of the smallest wrestlers in the history of wrestling, she started crying in the ring as if it was this huge accomplishment, right? Now, I understand in kayfabe it's like you've reached the mountaintop, but bro, you beat Alexa Bliss. You know what I mean? That's just ridiculous. How can someone that large of an athlete feel any sort of accomplishment beating like the smallest person ever? You know what I mean? There is nothing there. It makes no sense. Do you understand what I'm saying, cucks? That like in sport, it would be like, let's say you have like a soccer game and one team fields like 5 players and you beat them with your 11 players and you celebrate by crying like as if you won the World Cup, like, you know, through a meritocracy. You didn't. It's a rigged game, right? So that's why it's important that the women's wrestling needs to be normalized a little bit, right? I understand that, like, historically women have been kind of the same size with an exception here and there, like a China or like a Nicole Bass or an Awesome Kong, but typically they're all about the same size. Like, it's conceivable that Gail Kim could beat up, like, I don't know, Angelina Love, right? It's conceivable that Velvet Sky could beat up Gail Kim in real life, you know what I mean? All these things are within the realm of possibility. And in WWE, it's been like this for a long time. Like, who would win a fight realistically? Victoria or Trish Stratus? Victoria, probably, right? But it's not inconceivable. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. Now, I know what you people are thinking. Some of you are thinking, but Hater, how can we believe that someone like, I don't know, Eddie Guerrero can beat Brock Lesnar? Well, I got news for you, pals. Or, for example, how can Rey Mysterio beat Big Show? I got news for you, pals. That, too, is inconceivable. That, too, should not be happening. But it's a little bit less inconceivable because at least Rey Mysterio is a grown man and he is muscular, right? So it's believable that Rey Mysterio could muster up enough strength to jump off the turnbuckle and kick someone in the face and beat him that way, right? It's conceivable that even if you're 170 pounds, 160 pounds, whatever Rey Mysterio is, if you spin your legs really fast and you kick someone in the face with both legs, it's gonna hurt. I mean, there's no way around that. If he tries to hurt him, it's gonna hurt. So it's a bit more conceivable in that sense. But seeing like someone like Tamina, for example, Tamina having problems beating like Naomi is ridiculous. You know, it's just foolish. So that's one problem that I have with women's wrestling. I have several, but that's a big one because it's like, not only does it make it unbelievable, but what is the accomplishment you get, right? Especially if the division is stacked in such a way where there's like 1 or 2 Nia Jaxes. Like there's pretty much one Nia Jax because Tamina is like not on TV. You know, if you're the only one, like imagine if it was like the Cruiserweight division and Braun Strowman, you know? And then Braun Strowman beat Drew Gulak and he was like, yeah, I'm the champion. He started crying. You know what I mean? That makes no sense. At least when you have the Big Show around, you had Kane, you eventually had Great Khali, Undertaker, then you had lower like sized wrestlers that were in the running of being able to conceivably beat up the Big Show. Like who to win a fight? The Big Show or Triple H? The Big Show or The Rock? Obviously the Big Show would destroy them both. But it's within the realm of possibility. So because the roster was constructed in such a manner that it's conceivable for someone like The Rock to beat Big Show, and then it's conceivable for, I don't know, Val Venus to beat The Rock, and then Tajiri can beat Val Venus, and Tajiri's the same size as Shannon Moore, who's the same size as Tozawa, who's a little bit bigger than Rey Mysterio, then you can kind of do the steps, right? But when it's just a bunch of cruiserweights, it's 205 Live, and Kane, there's no way anyone's going to beat Kane. It just doesn't feel fair, you understand what I'm saying? It feels foolish. Next up, we had Liv Morgan against Ruby Riott. I'm not sure if this was a rematch of last week. I mean, if it was the same exact match as last week, then they just rebroadcasted it with like adding Samoa Joe in commentary because nothing was different. The same shit happened. Liv Morgan hit the Oblivion. Get it? Oblivion. Anyways, she hit that move and pinned Ruby Riott afterwards. Byron Saxton interviewed her. He was like, do you think your career is like, you know, like approaching a new stage? She's like, I don't know, Byron. I'm supposed to be like invested in this. Like, I don't give a fuck. 2 months ago, she was gonna have this like complete reinvention angle, and then that turned into like she's a lesbian and in love with Lana angle, and now she's just back to feuding with Ruby Riott. And Ruby Riott, like during the match, like someone was like, one of the announcers was like, Ruby Riott said she carried Sarah Logan and Liv Morgan on her back. And like, carried him into what? It's not like Ruby Riott accomplished something. The whole "I carried you" this whole time only works if you accomplish things. So if a tag team breaks up, like Edge and Christian or the Dudley Boys or the Hardy Boys, one of them could be like, yo, I carried you. You were the weak link. If it weren't for me, we wouldn't be champions. You're just another guy that got my tables, Devon. That's why that's effective, right? And then you have a feud, and that feud determines who the superior Dudley is, if you will, right? Or the superior Hardy, or whether it's Edge or Christian. That's what I'm saying, right? If you're Kai and Tai, if one day Taka Michinoku says to Funaki, I carried you for all these years, the counter argument is, carried me into what? Getting my ass beat by Farouk and Bradshaw every week? That's what you carried me to? What are you talking about? It's like this jobber, Liv Morgan too, but Ruby Riott thinks that she's like, Shawn Michaels who's carrying Triple H. That's not what's happening, motherfucks. Like, Liv Morgan beating Ruby Riott is not an upset. They're both jobbers. Like, who cares who wins? And then this was made worse by the Byron Saxton segment where he was like, oh, like, do you think you're approaching a new, period of your career? Like, who gives a fuck, man? I don't give a fuck about her career. Fuck her career. What do you think of them apples? Next up, we had the return of Jinder Mahal, and this was awesome. Now, he looked weird because he cut his hair and he's balding, but he was still in great shape. And this was great because it made me realize, why the fuck are we going to see Seth Rollins versus Drew McIntyre? The real story here is Drew McIntyre and Jinder Mahal. You don't even have to talk about the fact that we're in 3MB, but you can mention it, right? Or you can talk around it. Like, they're friends and they're like really good friends in real life. And Drew can be like, Jinder, like, you inspired me to do this. And Jinder's like, yeah, I inspired you too, Drew. And I love you too. Boom, Colossus, right? Jinder turns heel momentarily, and then he goes after Drew McIntyre. And now what you've done is you've established Jinder once again as a main eventer, and he's a big guy, and you're having him fight another big guy who is your current champion, right? This makes sense. Having loser Seth Rollins, who lost to Kevin Owens, makes absolutely no sense. But I'll get to that in a bit, motherfucks. Next up, apparently winning the six-man tag allowed Apollo Crews to get a title shot at Andrade. This was cool. It was a good match for one reason only. The match itself was whatever. I didn't really watch it that much, but it was cool because it was presented as if Apollo Crews actually had a chance. And this is what they should be doing on Raws where there's no audience, right? Keeping me interested. Instead of showing me jobbers like Brendan Vink every week, keep me interested, motherfuckers. Change the U.S. title. Andrade's been champion for a fucking eternity and has accomplished nothing with it. So do something. Do the draft. Do something, man. Figure it out. The draft would actually be a great idea because you don't need the wrestlers to be there. You know what I mean? You just have like Vince McMahon read the draft. So there you have it. I mean, like, it was well constructed as a match, and it made me happy that Apollo Crews is getting a mini push. Now, I'm not saying he's going to win the Money in the Bank, but he's got to be one of the favorites now. I know that sounds insane, but I'm also the kind of guy, I didn't have my YouTube back then, but I'm also the kind of guy that predicted that Jinder Mahal was going to win that six-man match that he won, and he was going to go and become champion, because I saw the wheels turning. And I'm not saying this was going to happen with Apollo. I'm not sure. I still think it's going to be Aleister Black, unfortunately. I'm hoping it's Rey Mysterio, but I would be okay if it were Apollo Crews, because he's exactly what you should be as an employee. I have a lot of respect for this man. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe he's out there bitching and moaning on Twitter every day, but as far as I know, he just shuts his mouth and does his job, and there's something to be said about that. You get rewarded if you keep doing that. Now, if you're a pussy and you don't do your job, and then you leave WWE and you're like, nah, Vince never liked me, get the fuck out of here, Do like Apollo Crews, like Mark Henry, like Kane after he got his second title shot, like Christian, like fucking Booker T even, Booker T, who came in as like an outsider and paid his dues and became champion. Now, I know what I just said. I said paid their dues, right? And here's where I'm going with that. Because as you all know, I don't believe in paying your dues. I believe the cream rises to the top, and that's how it's going to be, right? You do what you got to get to the top, as long as it's ethical and good. But here's the thing, right? I cannot ignore the fact that paying your dues is a thing that people talk about, right? And again, I don't agree with it at all, but I will say this. What happens to people that pay their dues and don't complain. You know, that's one thing I fucking hate. Let me tell you something, motherfucks. One of my friends was telling me, he was saying, Hater, you know, not all of us, because the Hater works from home, motherfucks, and I have been working from home for years before the coronavirus. So for me, this hasn't been that much of a challenge. As you know, I moved to a new apartment, so I'm still kind of enjoying myself. I'm not really like bothered by this situation, you know? Now, but my routine has changed significantly. I would typically go to this coffee shop down the street from my old apartment, which is still close to my new apartment. It's actually closer now, right? I would go to that place and I would have a coffee and I would work there, and I had a nice little routine. So here's the problem that I have with this, right? My friend's like, look, man, not all of us work from home, because he works in an office, right? He's like, not all of us work from home. So, you know, not all of us are settled into this, like, you know, stay-at-home lifestyle. And this pissed me off. And here's why. Because my friend was being a bitch, right? He was complaining about how the coronavirus was affecting him. And I was telling him, like, man up, dude. Shit happens, right? And he was like, and what he took from this was he was like, well, you don't mind, you know, because it's not as hard on you. Well, wait a second. Just because I don't bitch and moan about it doesn't mean it ain't hard on me, motherfucks. And this is the same mentality that I'm employing on Apollo Crews and other people. Just because Apollo Crews isn't out there bitching and moaning on Twitter how he didn't get a push and now he's going to leave the company and go to AEW or become the Revival #2, whatever the fuck they're called now, right? Doesn't mean that he's not unhappy with his status, right? You think Akira Tozawa joined the WWE knowing he was going to be a jobber? I'm sure he understood it was possible, but they all hoped for better, right? But he doesn't bitch and he doesn't moan. And this is something that personally I admire. And real ones admire this quality. People that don't complain, people that just fucking hold it all in or vent it all out in various ways, right? But don't complain and don't make their problems someone else's problems, right? And that's the reason why I think Apollo Crews being rewarded is just desserts, because he fits the category. He's someone that definitely has paid his dues according to the smart population, right? And he's someone that has qualities that make him better than he should be. Now, I'm not saying, again, that Apollo Crews should be the world champion or anything like that. Maybe one day, motherfucks. But that's not something that I can speak to right now. What I'm saying is this. When Jinder Mahal won the match, they cut to a shot of Andrade, and I realized it was clear as day the difference between Jinder Mahal, someone who should be a main eventer, and Andrade. Like, just cutting from a picture of Jinder Mahal, all vascular, muscular as fuck, like raising his arms, and going to chubby Andrade, you know, you're like, oh, okay, like Andrade has no business being a champion because he's fucking Andrade. I mean, like, look at him, just lose some weight, grow a few inches, you know what I'm saying? Do your job. You know, Apollo Crews has done his job. He hasn't gotten complacent. He's been going out there, hasn't complained. So I really hope that he gets an opportunity to do something. And he already is by being in the Money in the Bank ladder match and getting the pinfall tonight. So that's what I got to say about that. He's someone that actually deserves a shot, but he's one of those people that will not get mentioned that as someone that deserves a shot. No one will ever say, man, Apollo Crews is underrated. You want to know why? There's two reasons. One, because he doesn't continuously keep talking and keep associating himself with his past in Japan. He stays true to what he is now. He works for the WWE and he acts that way, right? He does the job. He doesn't bitch and moan. He doesn't threaten to like leave the company. All these pussy bitch-made shit. And I'll leave it at this. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. A closed mouth don't get fed. But let me tell you something about that squeaky wheel, motherfucks. That squeaky wheel is bitch made. What do you think of them apples? So there you go, motherfucks. That's what happened. Paulo loses to Andrade. And then we have Ricochet and Cedric Alexander versus two jobbers with the fleur-de-lis on their tights. So I can only assume they're French Canadians. I don't know why this is important, but that's the only distinguishing thing that I could see in these motherfucks. They lost after the new double team finisher where Cedric Alexander ties the guy up into like an STO kind of. And Ricochet does a drop kick, a missile drop kick, and hits him in like this like impact STO. Whatever. This has going nowhere written all over it. This is the tag team equivalent of what they were doing with Eric Rowan. This has nowhere going written on it, and because it has nowhere written on it, I cannot get emotionally invested or invested in any capacity in this garbage, right? I just couldn't. It's garbage. So, with that being said, afterwards, everything I just said about Apollo was shot down the drain because they showed him limping and crying like a bitch. This is not what he should be doing. I don't understand this. Why is he crying? You lost a match. You've lost hundreds. I understand he was getting close to achieving a goal, but he didn't do it. But what he should do is say this. Hey, I fucked up. He beat me. I make no excuses. I'm gonna get better, and I'm gonna win the motherfucking Money in the Bank. That's what we should do instead of giving me this like, oh, I don't have no confidence in myself. Shut up. I have confidence in you, Apollo. Do it, motherfucker. So, anyways, after that, what do we have? I stopped taking notes because I don't think there was anything else, to be honest. What was it? I think was there a women's match? I don't know. I think they talked about Becky Lynch a little bit. At some point, there was a Viking Raiders thing, and then in the end, we had to tolerate a contract signing between Drew McIntyre and Seth Rollins. Now, let's just go over what happened real fast so we can get to the real point. They signed a contract. Buddy Murphy came, tried to distract Drew McIntyre. Drew went for the Claymore. Seth moved. Buddy Murphy aided. This is after Drew McIntyre said you have no followers or whatever, right? They teased this like split between like Rollins and Buddy Murphy. Like I'm supposed to give a fuck if Buddy Murphy turns. Like it's like remember back in the day when Carlito would like turn face or heel every couple of weeks, and it's just lost that, or the Big Show when he would turn face and heel, it just lost its gravitas. And I'm like, I don't give a fuck, man. You know, so that's kind of like how I feel about Buddy Murphy. Like I don't really give a shit about Buddy Murphy if he turns face. Like he's not an interesting character. So whatever, right? Now, on to two main points that I want to make before I go away, motherfuckers. Point one. All right. I'm cool with someone losing a match and getting a title shot because I don't believe in the whole you got to pay your dues argument. However, I will say this. In the context of what's happening, like knowing that Kevin Owens wasn't going to be around the weeks after WrestleMania because of whatever, coronavirus, maybe he's in Canada, who the fuck knows, right? Knowing all this, why in the hell did you have him go over at WrestleMania? It would make much more sense for Rollins to beat him at WrestleMania, and then Rollins could have an actual claim to the number one contender title. Now, if you had a plan to push Kevin Owens, I totally understand. But that's not what's happening now, is it, motherfuckers? So they should have had Rollins win, and then do whatever he needs to do with Drew, and then after that, Kevin Owens comes back and beats Rollins to end their feud or something, you know? That would have made more sense. That's not what happened. And I don't like that, motherfuckers. Now, on to some other news, motherfuckers. I've already done a video. I've done a few videos that I should upload. I'll probably upload this one today and then a few tomorrow or something. Or maybe I'll save them for the next Hater Mania, motherfuckers, where I'm going to post like 8 videos in a day or some shit. So now let me tell you this. A lot of people were talking about fucking, what's it called? Vince McMahon's promo on Friday night. I watched it briefly. And people were like, oh, Vince is getting old. You know, this is just the smart fantasy, right? Just like it's a smart fantasy that Otis got with Mandy, because a lot of the smarts look like Otis. You know, they're maybe I'll get with Mandy too. Shut up, right? This smart fantasy needs to end. And the smart fantasy that is the most rampant is Vince is out of touch and Vince is getting old. None of that is true. Now, I will admit that Vince looked old. He looked a little fidgety. He didn't have that same, you know, swagger that he typically has. But that's not because he's old, motherfuckers. He's only like in his 70s. You know, and 75, whatever the fuck he is, ain't that old nowadays, motherfuckers. Vince McMahon will live to 100. Mark my words, at least. So that's not the real issue here. The real reason Vince was behaving that way had nothing to do with the fact that he's old, motherfuckers. It had to do with two things that people completely missed. Number one, it is a legitimate moment. It's not a scripted moment. It's a legitimate moment between him and his son-in-law, right? Who he's family with. And between him and Shawn Michaels, who is by far, undoubtedly, the most loyal WWE employee of all time. I mean, it's either him or Taker, right? But it's got to be Shawn Michaels because when the big names were bouncing and his friends were leaving, Shawn Michaels he stuck around, motherfuckers. He stuck around, and then when they needed him, he came out of retirement, and he not only did he stick around, but he gave it his all for years. Taker too, don't get me wrong. But with, like, if you remember my list of top 10 wrestlers or whatever, something like that, I said Stone Cold isn't on this list, or maybe he's low on the list, I don't remember exactly, right? And the reason is because Stone Cold, I hate to say it, is bitch made. You know, he's a cool dude. I'm sure he's like an awesome guy. But back in the day, in 2001, 2002, during that time, before he left, he was being a bitch. He didn't want to put Brock over, right? Which I understand. You want to protect your character. But like Vince McMahon said, he took his ball and he went home. He put his ego before the company. The company that had made him into an international A-list level star. You know? And that's fucked up and had given him millions of dollars. And the opportunity to make millions more elsewhere. So that's the kind of bullshit that I don't like, you know? Whereas people like Shawn Michaels and Undertaker have done what they're supposed to do, you know? And they've done it well. They didn't quit. They didn't say, oh, it was too hard for me. They just did it, motherfuckers. They're real ones. That's the difference. They're real ones. So that's what I got to say about that. So the fact that it was an emotional moment, legitimately, and it wasn't like a kayfabe, fabrication, is one element that explains why Vince was being the way he was being. Another element is that he's been going through a lot of shit, motherfucks. So he's probably like weirded out by the fact that he had to close XFL, a bunch of other shit. And third, and most important, probably the most important element, is Vince McMahon cannot come out there and cut a promo the same way that he normally would, because he's not fucking Kevin Owens. He understands that his promo style plays off the crowd. And if there's no crowd, how can he play off the crowd? Cuts. You understand what I'm saying? Kevin Owens comes out there, says a bad joke, and looks around and the crowd like laughs because they're idiots, right? And he's like, yeah, I made my point, Rollins, and he's trying to be this like cool and funny guy, and he's not. Vince McMahon knows what he is. Vince McMahon's the kind of guy that smells money and makes weird faces. Vince McMahon needs the audience to react to him, and especially when he's out of character. So there you have it, motherfuckers. Don't count your chickens before they hatch. Vince McMahon ain't going nowhere, motherfuckers. Deal with that. So that explains that. And with that, I'm out, motherfuckers. Deal with it.